Hello and welcome to Communityforce training. Today's session, we will be covering the scholarship and grant training in regards to creating your application form. And this will be part one. There are 3 different parts to this training. Parts 1 and 2 are for the majority of the clients. And then the individuals that have a one-to-many application process where you have funds that you're linking to your application, multiple funds to that single application. There will be a part 3 regarding how to set that process up, creating that criteria that matches the applicants to your specific funding sources for scholarships. And that is mainly for our scholarships clients. That will be that part 3. So to get started, some of the items we're going to be starting to review in part 1 is the basic getting started with building of your application form. And prior to this training, you've more likely reviewed the manage application fund setup in the prior training regarding how to set that up. That will come into play. We'll talk about that a little bit here as we're building the application. We may refer to some of the items in that training. So if you've taken that training, that's great, and you'll understand some of that fund setup discussion that we have today. So we're going to talk about creating an application form versus cloning an application form. And then once you create your application form, those key application settings for the area of setup that will be used to create your application form, create the questions, all that setup functionality that will be used to create your application. And then, of course, the general information overview, we'll talk about that. That's an important element of your application form. That's pretty much the control center of your application. So we'll talk about that. Pre-qualification questions. A lot of you may be using pre-qualification questions, pre-qualifying applicants prior to accessing the site. So we'll talk about how those are set up. Request instructions for applicants. If you have request sections where the applicant's coming to an area, they see the name of the section, they provide an email address for that individual, and then they nominate that person to complete a section on their behalf, and they do not have access to that section. Those are called request sections. A lot of times in scholarships, they're used for letters of recommendation or to get the transcripts from your counselors. Grant users may use it to get maybe an executive director's signature, or maybe there's a fiscal sponsor that will be used for that agency to be able to apply for granting on your site. So of course, this is training for scholarships and grants, and so it is the same information as on the scholarship site as it is on the grant site. Anytime we come to an area that may be a little different on the grant site, we'll refer to that so that you grant users understand what it looks like on your site as well. And then also the submit application message, that's something that all applicants will get. So we'll talk about how to adjust that. Text tabs if you want to activate them. And then collaborator and proxy instructions, we'll talk about what those are more as we dive into the actual build of the application. Those are something that a lot of our grant users use. Occasionally our scholarships may use them, but the majority of the time grant users have collaborators and proxies. And then creating and cloning sections. Once you build the shell of the application, all this information that we just discussed, then you can start building your sections. And then within the sections, you can start building the questions. So we'll pretty much stop this part 1 session with creating sections. And then with part 2, we'll pick up with the building of actual questions. So we wanted to keep these sessions within an hour. So we wanted to kind of break those up accordingly.